Welcome, everyone. I'm Kim Wade-Benzoni from the Fuqua School of Business at Duke University. It's great to be here and to have this opportunity to share my work with you. Today, I'm going to be talking about a line of work that explores the psychology of intergenerational decisions. I will be presenting an overview of this research program, sharing a handful of some of the most important empirical findings from this line of work. To start out, I'd like to delineate the parameters of the problems I studied. One of the most important aspects of intergenerational relations is that the interests of present and future generations are not always aligned. For example, maintaining sustainable levels of beneficial resources for future generations can require that the present generation give up some of those benefits for themselves. Similarly, protecting future generations from costly burdens may require that the present generation incur some of the costs of managing those burdens themselves. In my research, I consider situations in which people are faced with a trade-off between self-interest in the present and the interests of others in the future. The goals and focus in this research program have been to first, identify the key features of intergenerational decisions and use those insights to develop experiments that emulate those features. Second, identify the central barriers to intergenerational beneficence. And importantly, to identify factors that lead people to act on the behalf of future generations. I study a very particular kind of situation that is characterized by the following features. First, the present generation has complete unilateral decision-making power over decisions with consequences for future generations. That is, future generations have no voice. Further, social actors are removed from the social exchange context over time, and so they do not benefit or suffer from the consequences of their prior decisions. A key implication of this second boundary condition is that there's no opportunity for future generations to reciprocate the good or bad given to them by prior generations. The simultaneous presence of these features enables me to identify the factors that lead people to act on the behalf of future generations, even when there is no material or economic incentive for them to do so. It helps to differentiate the psychology of intergenerational decisions from more typical intergroup situations in which other parties have their own voice. Critically, intergenerational contexts are characterized by the intersection of intertemporal and interpersonal dimensions. They affect the future and they affect other people. We know that it's difficult for people to defer consumption of benefits in the present and save them for the future. There's a very large and well-established body of research on intertemporal choice showing that people tend to discount the value of resources that are consumed in the future, and there's a strong preference for consumption in the present. And we also know it's difficult for people to give up beneficial resources so that other people can have them. So if we put these two forces together in the intergenerational context, we might expect a compounded force working in opposition to intergenerational beneficence, and we might expect the prospects for future generations to be quite grim. This raises the question of why would anyone ever act on the behalf of future generations when there's nothing in it for them? And this is the question that this research seeks to answer. I can share with you that in literally dozens of experiments in which there's no material or economic incentive to give anything to future others, nearly everyone leaves something for future generations. And in fact, there are surprising levels of intergenerational beneficence in light of the inherent barriers. Why is that? What is going on that is counterbalancing the significant forces that work in opposition to intergenerational beneficence? And the answer is that the combination of intertemporal and interpersonal components create conditions of special significance that make it possible for people to get something that they really want and need, and that is very motivating under certain circumstances. What people can get by acting on the behalf of future generations is legacy. You don't get legacy by having a fleeting temporary effect. And you don't get legacy by affecting only your own future self. You need both these elements, time and others, in combination to create conditions that make it possible for you to leave a legacy. Legacy motivations are rooted in the desire to feel that one's life has meaning. And the legacy itself functions as a carrier of that meaning, extending the self into the future through impacts on future others. We define legacy as an enduring contribution attached to one's identity and manifested in the impact that one has on others beyond the temporal constraints of the lifespan, or more broadly understood, an impact that continues after one has left the context in which the contribution was created. When legacy motivations are enacted, people are going to be more likely to exhibit behaviors that benefit future generations. Given that legacy motivations are so important in intergenerational decisions, a central agenda for my co-authors and I has been to identify the factors that induce legacy motivations. We've looked at many variables, but today I'm only going to talk about a handful of them that represent some of the most important and interesting variables that we've looked at so far, including the behavior of previous generations, power, and death. We have also looked at other variables, such as resource valence, that is, whether resources are benefits or burdens, uncertainty about the future, affinity with future generations, perceptions of fairness, and others. But in the interest of time, I will focus on these three today. First, the behavior of prior generations makes a difference. We often inherit the consequences of the decisions of prior generations. And while people don't always have the opportunity to reciprocate the behavior of prior generations directly back to them, they can reciprocate in a more generalized way by behaving similarly to the next generation. When we know we have benefited from the legacy of the prior generation, that gets us thinking about the positive legacy we want to leave for future generations. And that in turn leads to behaviors that are beneficial to future generations. This is a very robust effect that has been replicated many times and across multiple studies. The initial work was published in the Academy of Management Journal years ago. But my co-authors and I wanted to take a closer look at this phenomenon to try to better understand some of its nuances. In particular, we wanted to know what happens if outcomes to subsequent generations don't match the intentions of prior generations. For example, what if the intentions of prior generations were good, but the outcomes to subsequent generations were bad for reasons beyond the prior generation's control? Under such circumstances, is the present generation influenced by the prior generation's good intentions or by the bad outcomes they inherit? Along with co-authors Min Bang and Christy Zhao, in multiple studies, we found people make their decisions based on the perceived intentions of previous generations, rather than the actual outcomes inherited, as long as they have information about those intentions. When information about intentions is not available, that's when people infer intentions from outcomes, and that can be problematic when intentions and outcomes are decoupled. This work was published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology more recently than the original set of studies. Another variable we have looked at is power. This work is in collaboration with Lee Toast and Hannah Johnson. Leaving a great legacy is arguably the most powerful thing you can do in your career and life because it enables you to have an influence well into the future, even after you are out of the picture yourself. Most research on power suggests that the experience of power tends to make people more self-focused and self-interested. However, this research primarily considers the effect of power in limited timeframes. Our research on intergenerational decisions involved longer timeframes and revealed that power can lead decision makers to be more concerned with the interests of others in the future. Across multiple experiments, we found that when people are thinking about power or feeling more powerful, they're actually more generous to future generations, because they're more focused on their legacy and they feel more social responsibility as compared to when their power is not prominent. This set of studies can be found in organizational behavior and human decision processes. Finally, one of the most effective means of prompting legacy motivations to emerge is through death priming. By death priming, I mean we remind people about death. When we're reminded about death, we remember that we don't want to die, we want to live, but we understand that death is inevitable. And that fact can create an existential dilemma in light of our deeply rooted survival instinct. One of the most effective things we can do to buffer our anxiety about death is to attempt to transcend death by finding meaning in our lives. Central to this meaning is that we have an impact that persists beyond our physical existence. People feel better in the face of death if they're part of something that will live on after them. Having a positive impact on future generations can help fulfill that need. In collaboration with co-authors Lee Toast, Morel Hernandez, and Rick Larrick, we found that when people are primed with death, they are more generous in resource allocations to future generations. You can find more details about this set of experiments in our article published in Psychological Science. In some conceptual work I've done with Adam Grant and published in the Academy of Management Review, we looked more closely at death awareness, and we argue that it can be experienced quite differently in either an anxious or reflective state, which we call death anxiety versus death reflection. In the anxious state, people are very emotional and apprehensive and focused on self-protection. In contrast, people can experience death awareness in a more reflective state, which is more cognitive and analytical and can promote more durable pro-social behaviors. In ongoing research with Matthew Fox, we found that both forms of death awareness can lead to legacy motivations and behaviors that benefit future generations. But the form of death awareness affects the nature of the legacy. Specifically, death anxiety leads to a focus on a legacy that benefits a more narrowly defined in-group, where in contrast, death reflection leads to a focus on a legacy that benefits larger, more inclusive groups. After we established the relationship between legacies and intergenerational behavior, we still had a lot of questions, such as, what are the factors that influence what kind of legacy people want to leave? And who do they want to benefit from their legacy? Are they focused on leaving benefits for their own children or for the world at large? Do they want to leave something tangible like a building or something less tangible like new ideas? So in order to understand this better, we conducted research that enabled us to develop a framework to categorize the forms that legacies can take, as well as the target recipients of the legacy. This work was done in collaboration with Matthew Fox. First, we found that legacy types fall into two general categories. Some people were more focused on tangible or physical legacies, such as money or buildings, whereas others thought of legacies more in terms of intangible things, such as values or ideas. Some legacies do have both, such as a book. The framework we developed based on this research is published in Research in Organizational Behavior. Another key dimension we identified is the beneficiary. Who is going to benefit from the legacy? And that fell into three categories. Individualistic legacies are focused on the benefits to oneself, such as building monuments named after oneself. Relational legacies benefit others with whom you share a direct relationship, such as giving your children an inheritance. And finally, collective legacies benefit larger collectives, such as charities, universities, or society at large. To summarize what I've discussed so far, intergenerational contexts create unique psychological dynamics. The combination of intertemporal and interpersonal components that characterize intergenerational contexts allow for the emergence of legacy motivations, which promotes intergenerationally beneficent behavior. Importantly, legacy creation offers an enduring sense of personal life meaning, and the desire to extend ourselves into the future and potentially beyond mortal life is a deep and strong impetus for generative action. In sum, legacy motivations are a central force in promoting behaviors that benefit future generations. So that gives you a sense of the foundational work in this area. Our bigger goal has always been to use these insights to develop ways to improve societal and organizational outcomes. And so in current and ongoing research, my co-authors and I are exploring how inducing legacy motivations can be used as an intervention to improve societal and organizational outcomes. I acknowledge my co-authors on the research I talked about today as I went along, but once again, I want to recognize my wonderful co-authors on these projects. And to conclude my talk, legacy motivations are a central force in promoting behaviors that benefit future generations. And I look forward to discussing this with you further during the live Q&A portion. Goodbye, everyone. See you soon.